I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. It is a sunny, crisp day here in New York City. Andrew Quo, how are you staying cozy?
Man, I'm always cozy. It doesn't matter how crisp, how autumnal the day is. I'm always at my most crisp. Although, I have been thinking about leaving town a little bit. I know, unlike some of us, I don't leave town that much. But, you know, like, I miss peeping some leaves. I miss being around some ice-cold water.
So you're saying you're cozy when it's brisk, but you are down for more briskness. You think you're missing the brisk.
My cozy is a state of mind. But the briskness, the physical briskness, I love this time of year, man. I love to explore the great northeast of America.
Did you even peep a leaf?
I live now around many leaves to be peeped, but not in a majestic way across the coast.
So you had like an inadvertent leaf peep. Like you looked outside and there were leaves. Like you peeped them, but you didn't actually leaf peep. As
It's
in
like, right.
surrounded by the incredible kaleidoscope of colors of trees.
It's sort of like RJ Barrett in a basketball game. I didn't mean to peep a leaf or steal a basketball, but just being around by accident, you kind of do both. It's not a skill, Ben.
You just weren't that great at it.
No, it's not a skill to be noted for, but you just have to be present, man. Just show up, and then you're going to peep a leaf.
And you're starting to get a lot of criticism because you have a max contract as a leaf peeper, and you're just not actually living up to it.
Listen, they're paying me to peep leaves, and I'm just kind of doing it casually. You know, they say showing up is a skill, and that's the only skill I have.
But you're young. You have a lot
right.
of upside
I just turned
as a
18.
leaf peeper.
Right. I have the Coach K tutelage and youth on my side.
You can still peep a few leaves. Was that turmoil in the back of your home?
That was a leaf falling outside. A big ass one.
It's like, are we hearing a home invasion in process? Like, no, it's just a big leaf.
Beautiful colored leaves. An invasion
But there's
of
still some
colors.
There's still some leaf peeping to be done here. If you go further north, like even an hour or two, leaf peeping is donezo. It's a dub. No more leaf peeping.
It only lasts
to be
for
peeped.
like a week or two, right?
We call that peak in the leaf peeping industry. Peak leaf peeping.
Didn't you do some peeping? Didn't you go upstate and peep some leaves?
I did.
Wow.
And you're the one being max contract. I'm here on a rookie deal, peeping leaves, left and right. I went up to Montreal this last weekend. Just whipped it up there spontaneously, but there's no leaves to be peeped up there. They are long since changed.
Right.
If you go that far north, we're talking by car 6 hours, like straight shot north, like right up Albany, Adirondacks, Montreal.
And the leaves are to the east, kind of, right? They're not directly north of Manhattan or New York City.
I feel like if you go up to like Harriman Park, there might be a few more leaves because that's like an hour up. But yeah, once you get up to the Catskills, leaf peeping, done. It's done.
Yeah,
It's just geographic. Further north, higher elevation, the earlier the leaves fall off the trees.
pick your fighter. Changing leaves in America in the Northeast or cherry blossom season in Japan, which is crazy. I was there for the beginning of it one year, and the amount of tourists that come out for these damn blossoms is wild, man.
How brief is this window?
I think it's a couple weeks, if I'm not mistaken. It happened suddenly, so everyone just kind of floods in at the same time. and local businesses like rely on it kind of. It's cool as hell. Everything is like this cartoon candy pink for a second, and it's, I mean, with Instagram, get out of here. But how do you maximize like big ass trees changing colors with Instagram? Because you kind of got to take the pictures from pretty far away.
I mean, you can always like find that one like brilliant red leaf and just take a photo of that. You know, that's nice. But you want to hear about Montreal?
Yep.
Big Easy, the city of lights, the birthplace of rock and roll, the concrete jungle.
Voila.
Montreal.
Zut alors.
Seva.
C'est bien.
I hadn't been there in a long time, and I was inspired by a beneficial exchange rate for us. Well, I guess we're all gringos in our own way. That doesn't really apply against Canadians. Anyway, for Americans, Yankees. So it's like 75 cents to the dollar, and it's a relatively affordable city already. Relatively so, I guess. But when it's 25% off, then it becomes pretty affordable.
That's a lot of escargot.
It's a lot of maple syrup. It's a whole lot of maple syrup. But yeah, Montreal is I hadn't been there in a while. I gotta say, they have kind of nailed down the kind of restaurants that I think you and I enjoy. And we like the full spectrum. We like the Christmas restaurants, of course. But they've really nailed small, tiny places, open kitchen, kind of a lot of interplay between staff and waiters and the customers who are there. Really good food, really good service, but like deeply unpretentious. Where everyone's just kind of hanging out. It's not that like macho restaurant culture where like they're very meat centric up there, of course, because it's Montreal and they love that shit. But I don't know. The places might have 15 seats. They're tiny, but they're doing really good food. I thought those were some really good spots that I went to up there.
Yeah, and the important thing, based off of also the pictures you were showing me, was kind of a little weird, right? Like, not something on the menu that's always like, ooh, like a weird terrine, or like a pickled vegetable that is off the beaten path. Like, it's not just the Balthazar menu or the corner bar menu down in Dime Square. It's not just burger and seafood tower.
Yeah, it's true. There's something about those places where the restaurants themselves are really simple. They're not being gimmicky. They're not winning off of the decor alone and then a really conventional menu. They're not winning off of location. They're in the middle of nowhere, a couple of them. One's in a neighborhood called Verdun, which I've never even been to. It's like a half an hour drive away from the plateau, which is kind of like a central district. Just sitting there kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it's great. And there's something about a lot of New York restaurants, especially the ones that are not like specifically ethnic, right? Okay, here's a new Cantonese spot. Here's a new Thai spot. Here's a new Indian spot. Like those are all unique. But the baseline restaurant in New York, I feel like has gotten a little dull.
Yeah, man. And it's like a Caesar salad, oysters, maybe a seafood tower, always a burger, an expensive steak, a roast chicken, and some sort of like tartine, maybe. You know, it's just like kind of samey stuff. And we're kind of splitting hairs in New York a little bit because we start accepting it as the menu that is offered to us, and we just like, well, is this steak better than that last steak, or is this like, you know, oyster different than the last one? And I think we have like we're in the doldrums a little bit restaurant wise in New York, in my opinion.
I think there's great restaurants, and there's ones who are doing things differently, of course. Like shout to like Le Roc or something like that. That we had a great time there, and they're really advancing the chartreuse program to an echelon unbefore seen.
Is it a flight?
16 chartreuses or get the fuck out of here.
Garcon, I'm only seeing 15 glasses here. I believe we're a glass short of a flight.
But generally speaking, this has probably been a problem is not the word that I would necessarily use here. But this has probably been something that we're noticing more right now, but it was probably the case at various points throughout history in New York City, where it's like everyone is making the same food and eating the same food. I don't know what era we're in, but like as you said, all we do is here's a martini, here are your good fries, here's your burger, here's your roasted chicken. I don't even know what cuisine this is at this point, but it's every place. That's just all we eat.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. Remember that op-ed Gabrielle Hamilton wrote about Prune and during the pandemic? And people came down on her for various reasons, you know. It brushed people the wrong way a little bit. And I was thinking about that article a little bit recently because she was right in a lot of ways. I think it's really hard to run a restaurant like hers and not just the food, but the vibe. She wanted to keep the room small. You know, she wanted to have this feel, and there was no way for her to kind of get over the hump with money-wise and to keep it sustainable, especially when something like the pandemic happens. And when you can optimize, when you have data and you can optimize a business like a restaurant, you don't really, I'm not a huge Prune fan. I wasn't a huge Prune fan, but you don't get many restaurants like that anymore. You get like, remember when Bourdain was trying to do his hawker stand and trying to bring all these amazing, famous people he made famous through his show over to America, and the Trump immigration kind of threw a wrench into things. It ends up he was going through a change mentally a little bit, as we found out later, and that kind of disintegrated. But on the low, they opened up a hawker stand like the one in Singapore in Times Square. They call that a maito to the uninitiated. But it opened up like last month, and it has a lot of those hawker stands that we've seen like on YouTube and all these TV shows. And the guy is there, that famous guy is there, but no one's really talking about it. And I fear the soul has been sucked out of that idea. I want to go there really badly, but I fear when I go there, it's going to be an optimized version of something organic.
Are you a fan of the mall in Flushing?
Which one? Jeez, yes, all of them. But
I've only been to the one that has several floors. There may be other ones. I've only been to the one where you can park in there, and then
sure.
It's. Do you like that dining experience, like the chaotic food court?
It's hectic because I'm usually with someone who isn't into like fighting for a seat or eating standing up, so I stress out because I don't want them to be bummed. But I have gone by myself and I love it. I just love it.
Like you stake out a sink.
Usually it's hard to find a bathtub, so I have to go there in my mind. It's a kind of meditation. The world is my bathtub, and I grab a dumpling here, I grab like a scallion pancake there, maybe like a dry pot here, and I love that experience. I love a night market. I love standing up, eating next to a garbage can or sink. Why? Are you opposed to this?
No, not really. I'm just trying to think of how I could get in my mental bathtub.
First,
take us through it, right? So you go in there, you see some dumps or some noodles that you like. Then what happens?
Back up. First, you got to gear up in your Knicks jersey, your Knicks shorts, your Knicks hat, and your Patrick Ewing Adidas.
Yep.
And then you go, and then you're mentally in a sync automatically.
Would you say that when you're in your mental bathtub, is it like a large tub, or is it the kind that your knees protrude out, or are you fully immersed in water with just like, your snout peeking out of the water?
Well,
are your ears submerged?
Let's say the tub is like a basin or a bucket, and since the world is your bucket and you're walking through the world, you are the walking bucket. So as long as you're geared up in orange and blue, And as long as you're mentally in this space, you are Michael Beasley forever.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can't say it any clearer. Yeah, I can't get any clearer than that. So if you don't follow that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was really good. No, I don't have a problem with those kind of environments, except that I kind of like hanging places where you're eating in that way. Like if you're gonna go somewhere, I kind of like hanging out there. Mm-hmm. If you're going to Queens and you go to Little Pepper, I like hanging out at Little Pepper and being in the restaurant for a little while. The problem with those food halls is that you can kind of bounce around a little bit, but it always feels like you're taking up space that other people need to eat, and it's a little. It's not even the chaos. It's just that functionally, it's like pound this food and keep it moving.
Yeah, you're talking about attention that is like, do you want to eat something delicious or do you want to hang out? And I think a lot of these places that serve normie stuff, like Corner Bar, want people to hang, want it to be vibey, a room. Our boy Chris Crowley mentioned or asked on Twitter, he's like, why is everyone talking about restaurants as vibey? What does this mean? And I was like, well, I think it's about music. I think if it's comfortable, if it's seeing people that maybe like you may know can relate to you, it like hones in a certain clientele that is comfortable there. So Jack's Wife Frida is not my vibe, but I think many people would consider that vibey. I really love Chez Ma Tante. That is like my favorite, even though the person who does the music there, Jordo Hot Dog Legs, is no longer there, but his music was my favorite. And I think it's real. So a food hall is not vibey, but you could probably get, in those malls, you can get some incredible stuff.
And for like a fraction of the price of a more vibey scene, just because they're a little stall and they don't have staff and they don't have real estate.
Sometimes though, it's a bust, man. Like, is there a level? So let's say this fictional or this real hawker stand in Times Square has actual hawkers from Singapore. Do you think it's going to have a taco effect where it's just like, ooh, people who know both say this is not authentic or real or tastes anything like what it's referring
to? The taco thing, I feel like it's a little bit mythological and is based on the fact that so many Mexican people who moved to New York early on were not from Mexico City, and were not from Oaxaca, but were from Puebla. So the people who are Mexico City and Oaxaca snobs about tacos always disliked New York tacos. I think that was like more of a Mexican regionalist issue. Mm-hmm. But as someone who just bought a tortilla
I was gonna say, man, alley oop.
Dude, you put the nicely round ball of masa right into my
Are you a
tortilla
masa
press
dork?
zone. No, should I become one?
You have to. You cannot put bad masa in that press.
I bought good masa. I ordered it on the internet. Mm-hmm. Got some nice blue masa, some yellow masa, and some white masa. I feel like I'm going to be a blue and yellow masa guy. Maybe I'll even snob it out and be like, I'm just blue masa only. Like, don't even pervert my press with anything less than the most azure
perverted press
of masas.
Yeah. Well, is lard involved here?
Lard would be involved if you wanted to make tamales, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using it. I'm just using. There's no fat. Mm-hmm. You're just using masa, water, a little salt, and I gotta say I have not quite mastered the ratios. I'm getting better. I had one. It was kind of wet, and I've talked to some people who are experts. Like, but this is also part of your incompetence. They're like, someone who's good at this could use a stickier tortilla that is easier to flatten and gets thinner because they actually just know how to peel it off and put it on the thing. They have the handiwork.
What motivated this
and I'm
purchase?
a novice.
Yeah. What motivated this purchase?
Well, I got a cookbook called Mi Cocina. And I'll tell you the author because it's quite good.
You're a
Mi
cookbook
Cocina-
boy. You love cookbooks.
I do like a good cookbook. It's Rick Martinez.
Oh, he's awesome. Right. He's Bon Appetit.
Yeah, and
Formerly Bon Appetit.
and then Food 52 maybe. I don't know. One of those. Yes,
gig.
yes. He's a
He's
personality.
good. Yeah, I'm into.
His cookbook's really cool, and I recommend it because it's one of those things where if you just go out and get the little pantry correct, most stuff in there is actually then pretty accessible. But you do need to go get some dried peppers. You do need access to jalapenos and poblanos and serranos. Like you have to get those kind of things, tomatillos. But if you have that, you can do most of the stuff in the book. So I've enjoyed that, and he always calls for like fresh corn masa, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna become a masa dork. So here I am, and like honestly, don't even talk about masa unless it's blue corn
Don't
around me.
Don't talk about. No. No.
Don't. I could sense the phrase "yellow masa" was about to come out of your lips, and I have to nip that in the bud.
I'm certainly more washed than you, but I have stopped doing this kind of stuff. Like someone gifted me an air fryer. I'm like, that's cool. 10 years ago, I would have had a hilarious couple days with this. I just don't care. I have it unopened. Like I finally got a gas range for the first time in my entire life after being an electric boy. But and it's opened up a world of walkage to me. I just don't care. I cannot spend any more time with this in my adult life because time is fleeting, and I just do not care about the breath of the dragon. I just don't care. The trick is add a drop of liquid smoke to your stir fry.
So you brought the wok to Poland. Well, yeah. Since I'm in Greenpoint, if you want to bring the wok over, if you want to bring the wok to Poland, we can do it.
That's right. Yeah, I cannot do this anymore in my life, and so I'm making Thanksgiving plans with some family members and maybe a couple friends. And they're like, what should we cook? I'm like, nothing. Could we just like do nothing and just hang out and just like make something exceedingly simple, like spaghetti and a salad, something like that? It's like, well, what about brining? I'm like, I do not want to do anything like that ever again in my life.
So this is a new quo. Not to say that. No, I'm gonna say it. I felt like you were someone who liked elaborate things before.
I was trying to like nail down like a pho stock for a few years, trying to figure out.
That's what I'm
like,
saying. I feel like when you did the Grub Street Diary, it was Baroque.
I was there until maybe 3 years ago. Maybe during the pandemic, I stopped. When everyone was making bread, I'm like, I'm done with this. I cannot do it better. These blue corn tortillas are trash. But don't
go there.
Like for a while, I was making my own dumplings. I'm like, what am I doing? What the hell am I doing? Like I have
okay. Hold on. To defend the tortilla press,
this is okay.
It costs like $80. It's not that big of an investment.
Very expensive. Oh, woo! Okay,
rich boy, dude. It's like you could get a cookie
Zuck.
sweater for about that. A nice crew neck. It is affordable.
Oh, more.
It's
useful.
not. It is, but like the crew necks, it is heavyweight and 100% cotton.
Well, a tortilla press you use once. The crew neck you wear like 200-300 times.
No. Given the options, I would take a cookie soup crew neck, which are available in our store right now. Duh. But I have those.
Right. You're swimming in those, right? Check.
On the tiers of things you need to own, yeah, the cookies, hoops, crew neck, a driver's collection. Whoo. You know, looking up, that's at the apex. Tortilla press down at the bottom in comparison, but it's still high up.
Enjoy a taco not wearing one of those sweatshirts. So first you have to get one of those sweatshirts, and then the world of tacos reveals itself.
Yeah, it would be obscene to
That's right.
eat a taco without a nice forest green or minty sage cookies hoops crew neck. Yeah. Look, I'm no
Cookiesoup.com.
fool.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, yeah, but you can't get good tortillas in stores. That would be the one reason to say like, all right, are you just dorking out on this, or is it actually a lot better than like, I don't know, whatever brand you're getting a flour tortilla or the really like dense corn ones that you get at the supermarket. These at least are superior.
The corn ones are hard, but Visa Hermosa makes amazing flour ones, like incredible, and they use coconut oil, which is awesome. But like, they also make corn tortillas, but they by the time they get to you, they're kind of brittle and they're very thick. But they're nice too. I think they sell a lot of those. I see a lot of restaurants bringing in like bags of those. I believe they're in like Bushwick. I forget where this factory is.
Is that the factory that also sells tacos?
I believe so. I've
been to that place. That place is cool.
Yeah, man. And there's like a mini like featurette about them on YouTube. Their flour tortillas are they're almost as good as Asian Peking duck pancakes. Amazing. But okay.
Wow.
Back to your tomfoolery.
Look who's a pervert press now.
Oh no, I buy them in a bag and I eat them out of the bag in my sink, which is the world. But so okay, what'd you put on these fraudulent tortillas?
Fraudulent? Have you seen the masa that I'm using?
I would like to try it.
I made a green chorizo. Again, this is all from Rick Martinez, like the Mi Cocina. It's got that cookie seal. Approval. Well, at least
what makes it green?
This side. You're using spinach and I think what else was in there, like peppers and scallions, and you're making like a green sauce.
Sounds delicious.
And it really is delicious. And you make a big amount, nice. And I froze some of it. That was really good. I did a chicken dish. Couple chicken dishes. I made some pozole.
Nice.
I've been working through that cookbook fast. It's pretty good.
And I don't want to stir the pot here, but were you alone doing all this? Like, is this a solo night? Are you just like, yo, I've come back from my trip peeping leaves. I've hung out with the homies. Me and you, we did it up the other night. And then you're like, I'm gonna take a little mental break here and reset my sink, which is the world. And did you make all of this?
Sometimes the pozole was a solo endeavor. That was a solo shot. Mm-hmm. Kind of an elaborate dish, but I think it was like a Sunday afternoon flex.
And not to get too hokey, I saw you post pictures of this. I love social media because it kind of like puts a little pep in your step when you're making this stuff. Like, ooh, I want to make it nice and post it, and someone gonna say something. It is the anti-lonely kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely want to plate things better.
For sure, I want to see it too. I'm just like, damn, this is like.
You know, it's funny because like, I was talking to someone. Was it you? No,
could it be?
Was it you? No, it was the Friends conversation, right? And it was someone. No, I was talking with Jason Johnson, our buddy, and he had showed me a tweet that someone had sent, and it was about how like people don't want to hang out with coworkers, and they were making fun of a New York Post article about how like Zoomers have killed like happy hour. Or like post office drinks. Like Zoomers have destroyed that too. And someone was roasting that idea, basically being like, no, we just have our home life. And I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't this the generation that has no friends? And you're telling me you don't want to waste your home life? What the fuck is home life for a 22-year-old?
Especially in a place like Manhattan, New York City, like, what does your home look like?
Home life? Is this... Look, introverts had their chance to shine during the pandemic, and honestly, I don't think they did that great.
They fumbled the bag, I would say. The masa bag.
But, like... Hold on, I'm going to read the tweet. Let me find it.
I mean,
all right.
what?
Okay. So the tweet was, the New York Post headline: Gen Z party poopers.
Have ruined Post, did you say? Nice.
Gen Z party poopers have ruined after work drinks, and someone who got 30,000 likes for this response was, Gen Z is killing the alcoholics with no friends who hate their home life industry. That's funny.
Yeah, that's good.
I like that. Who hate their home life?
Wait,
Are you
is
talking
this
about Gen Z? Or are we talking about like older people who want to have drinks but don't want to go home? I'm still just trying to figure out what
was this article
what are we
about
doing
the restructuring of power dynamics in the workplace? Like you cannot go have drinks with your boss anymore, right? It is fraught with legal issues and workplace badness, right? Like we've been scared straight into like not interacting professionally with anybody, especially when alcohol is involved.
Yeah, I think we have seen the ramifications.
It's not worth it.
Of what can happen from that relationship between alcohol and people in the workplace, and it being part of a culture of an office is now viewed as toxic. And
Yes.
not to say that it wasn't always toxic, but it was just acceptable in a way.
Right.
Like, go out with your coworkers and get drunk and things happen, whatever. And now you're like, well, that just can't. Like, that is opening a can of worms. That there's not enough upside.
Right.
You want to do team building, you can bring in donuts. People don't have to go do shots.
Yeah.
And I think it's right. I think that is correct. I mean,
think it's
one of my
better, too.
friends who was an astute businessman and ran a company, he's like, I never, ever, not once, drank with my employees.
Yeah.
He's like, he would have drinks with other people. He'd go to parties. He's like, he never had drinks with his employees, ever.
Mm-hmm.
He would throw parties for them. He'd buy out a bar so they could go and hang out. He'd go and say hello and just leave. He's like, I just didn't do it. I'm like, you're smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one of my friends who was like the most fun to hang out with nightlife wise in these sleaze years. Like just went stone cold sober. And I was like, yo, what spurred on this checkmate king behavior move? And they were just like, one night I just got really wasted with my employees and I realized it was a bad idea. It's like I put in a lot of work in my business and just like we didn't do anything bad, just like a bunch of shots and we were done by 10 p.m. But it just like, it felt bad. And this was years ago before all that stuff happened. And I think it's right too. Like there's certain corrections that just make more sense. And there's always been like the power hour kind of stock market, Wall Street cliche, right? Where you go and have a martini during lunch and that's where the action is. And that's where the insider trading happens. And that still happens. Like, if someone's languishing in like their field, I'm like, just being present is important. But when you remove that environment to be present in, it creates like another set of issues in like, well then how do I function organically within a work environment? If it's all clocking in, clocking out based off of my performance, does that create another kind of toxicity?
And it also puts women at such a huge disadvantage because, like, if you're going out drinking with people of the opposite sex in like an industry that is dominated by like cis people, then people are going to say, "Oh, what are you having? You're on a date?" But no, oh no, we're just talking business. But no, but like he's married. Why is he hanging out with her, or vice versa? And there's a creation of a stigma, I think, that doesn't exist when two guys just go out for drinks. Mm-hmm. And I think there is like that good old boy network is about like the lads are hanging out, and then over here it's like, oh, the women, and they're there for a different purpose. And I think it really is. It's super unfair for women in those industries because they are so focused on like dudes at the bar hanging out, broing down. And of course, women can do that. Obviously, they can. But it's just, especially I think, going back for years, there's just a stigma about like women in that environment around guys.
But this is a double-edged sword, right? Because and this always benefits like white middle-aged men, but like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
If we take that environment out and we're like, we want to level the playing field, no more dynamics outside of the office. It's about your performance. It's about when you're here. and it's about numbers. And then women are like, hey, I would like to have a family. And they're like, fair enough, you cannot be promoted. It's like, what the hell? It's like, well, who are you having this family with? It's like, oh, my buddy over there, he got promoted. And it's just like, it's deeply unfair. And I think there's benefits to optimization in everything. But like, if we don't see our like reflection as like what we are as human beings, it's like, then this could compound an issue.
Yeah, and I don't think this is the situation I described as the case at like many modern companies. I'm kind of talking about those industries that you were referring to where the actual work gets done at happy hour. The actual connections are made at like a 2-martini lunch. That it's not just, oh, here's a company and we're getting on a Zoom and here's a spreadsheet. That stuff is about these sort of mysterious connections between people that are forged outside of the office.
The painting world, the Chelsea art Tribeca thing is all that. There are no.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because, right, your office there isn't an office.
It's like my sink. It's nowhere and everywhere.
And I mean, from your experience, would you say that deals get done in the art world because of like the social calendar, because of social relationships versus ones that are based on optimization?
It is such a moving target, but it certainly doesn't hurt. It's hard to have a gallery space that isn't currently in Tribeca or Chelsea. Let's say you had an amazing gallery and you went to Harlem like Gavin Brown, and like people love you. People love your artist. The space is jaw-droppingly beautiful. But it's hard to get collectors over there. It is foot traffic, and it's hard to get vibes, right? It's hard to get people to write about something or build heat about something when the traffic is half as busy. I think the reason I love this world so much is because it is this organic. But it's very frustrating when it doesn't work because it seems like there's no answer.
I mean, there's people we know in the gallery world, and I feel like they're very active socially.
Oh my God!
That's but that's my window into that world, right?
I mean, you're right. I know they're always there. Yeah.
But I'm saying I know them because I see them out, and I don't know the side of the art industry that isn't out because I don't know the industry like that.
I mean, I had one of my friends is like I think a wonderful painter, but he's like kind of shy, right? And he'll always be like, "Hey, man, like, what can I do to kind of fluff my pillow a little bit? Like, I don't like to go out. I don't like to talk to people. Can people come to my studio?" I'm like, "Yeah, but that's kind of difficult because like incentivizing someone to do that is a different task at that point. If people don't know you, they can't like you. And if people don't like you, they won't do you a favor, And this is not sinister. I just feel like this is making friends or getting a steal in basketball. It's like you just have to be on the court. And then sometimes you don't. Like sometimes you get a max contract and have like a terrible steal rate. That happens. But like being around helps. And I mean, I don't know. That's why I love to live in New York City. That it's so expensive and so impossible here, but it's worth it. But if you don't use it to your advantage, which is just like checking stuff out, then I don't know.
I also think about the conversation we were having about happy hours and drinking and bars, and that it should be isolated from the workplace, like it's just sensible. I also don't necessarily understand the idea that Gen Z doesn't go to bars. Like, who doesn't, though? Right? In New York, we see young people out and about all the time.
For sure.
And I presume that when kids are going to college, they're going to parties. If we're talking about people who have just graduated college, that's certainly a community of people that goes out a lot and drinks a lot and goes to bars a lot. And we're not talking about necessarily like, oh, these are all downtown types. I'm talking people who go to the University of Wisconsin, Penn State, like everybody. Who is this group of Gen Z that isn't going out, isn't going to parties? Are they in cities?
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah,
I'm a little confused by where they are. We hear about them all the time, and I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm sure they do because you see them on Twitter. But are they overrepresented in this
Right.
idea of that's a huge group of young people that they just aren't going out, that they're not drinking, they're not socializing, they're friendless, they're hiding out in their apartments? Because we saw this happen in Japan for years, right? We've heard about this.
Right.
That's vaguely tied to like the incel, but it's also tied to the internet and gaming and social media. So they
Quiet quitting.
exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a branding issue. And like we saw this happen last week in the midterm election. It's just like, yo, Gen Z came out. We did not know that they were going to do this because no one told us they were going to do this. But they did it. And as far as we know, we're getting the information. But this seems like a branding issue because Gen Z doesn't want to brand itself as millennials because no one wants to be the previous thing. But I'm with you. Like, I don't really do much anymore, to my own admission, but there's plenty of Zers out there, Zoomers, zooming it up everywhere I go. And they're interesting and smarter than I ever was. And, like, are they just being misrepresented like the MAGA scene in social media? It's like Tucker Carlson is a huge deal. I'm like, no, we're all laughing at him. Like, you are not the only one laughing at him.
Well, in comparison to Gen X, which is a very tranquil generation, although getting roasted for being more conservative voting than
This happens to every generation, though.
but I just saw a tweet earlier today that was basically saying, I wonder how much of that Gen X voting population has been changed, especially with people of color, by the terrible policies, within criminal justice, basically, that went on in the 80s and 90s as well. And I'm like, valid.
Kamala Harris.
But there is a debate about whether generations actually get more conservative or not. Or it does seem to happen, but there also are some caveats, like people who are poor and people of color die. Like that just is like, oh, they're getting this generation, as they're getting older and older, they're getting more conservative. It's like, yeah, that's because the people who aren't as conservative are perishing.
And it's also a question of what kind of conservative. And this is not the most interesting conversation, but there's like spiritually conservative, fiscally conservative. Like, I don't think people who stress out about inflation and their mortgage necessarily all think they're, pro-life is the way to vote. Like, I don't think it's an all-encompassing one vote. But yeah, I mean, the suspicion that the liberal population gets a bit more conservative as they get older makes sense to me because, to your point, like health issues, healthcare, all these things become on the forefront, and Democrats are just worse at stuff sometimes. And Republicans kind of, they prioritize taxes and money, which is kind of clever, and we all know it's kind of like a hoodwink, but like, and then judges, right? Like Supreme Court judges enter the Supreme Court as conservative, but as they get older, they get more liberal. And I think that's an interesting thing. I think that happens with brains. I think as you get older, your fear ratchets up a little bit, and you kind of recoil by definition, become more conservative. You save more, you think about your kids, all this stuff. Time just catches up. But spiritually, you get smarter and more emotionally intellectual or smart. And then you kind of like, oh, that's some bullshit, or that's some bullshit. Everyone just has to lighten up. Like, you can watch a Dave Chappelle SNL opener and not lose your damn mind.
One of the theories about the Supreme Court that I thought was kind of interesting was that people got more liberal as they were on it because they're just spending time around other Supreme Court judges who are more liberal than they are. And like after a while, it's like you're just kind of around someone who's like, yeah, that's not fair. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can kind of agree with that.
I mean,
it's just kind of the osmosis of like not being so rigidly conservative because you're around people who you like.
The data for that is so crazy. Like for judges throughout America, it's like these economists have done such a good job trying to figure out like, well, what local sports teams won or lost that day when the judge handed out these verdicts. And we have data for hundreds and hundreds of these days. It's like, oh, when the local sports team won, the verdicts were a lot more lenient. Or it's like, was it before or after lunch? Was the judge hungry? Because they're usually harsher in their opinions when they're hungry, and then after lunch they're more lenient. Like it is bias, right? And like by definition, judges, their jobs are to be biased. And yeah, maybe they're around. It is kind of like an osmosis. They're around other people. I want to believe, the optimist in me wants to believe that as people get older, especially judges who see all these things coming back to them, all these stories of like Americans suffering kind of and fighting, my hope, the optimistic hope, is like people just like get a grip a little bit and be like, oh, you know what? Nothing is like this clear. Like this is a really horrible or enlightening situation and story, and maybe I was wrong. Like that's why in other cultures they celebrate age and we don't in America as much. But in Asia, like you celebrate your great grandmothers, like they're treasures in your house. You live with them. In America, it's just like you send them to Del Boca Vista where they use astronaut pens.
You had mentioned Dave Chappelle a second ago. I don't make a habit of watching Saturday Night Live.
Sucks.
It
sucks, man.
I just don't watch it. But I went to watch his monologue after the fact.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. It was very funny.
I understand why people got mad though, because people get mad for certain reasons that I have to understand. I have to put myself in their place, right? It's not that he's making art or creating commentary about a thing. Just the word is infuriating. Just the thought is infuriating. So when he says the two most dangerous words in comedy are the Jews, right? Like, I thought that was like, oh, that's going to get him in big trouble. Because that sounds awful. But that's his point. That's the joke. I think we're easing up on him. The reactions I've been reading on Twitter have been more of a conversation than just like a swift judgment. Have you been following his whole like last few years at all? Like, do you have thoughts on that? Not to like put you in a spot, but like.
Well, yeah, everything that he says is controversial. I fully agree with and endorse. No,
right. But,
no,
I mean,
I just thought his monologue
yesterday.
I thought his monologue yesterday was funny. I've seen some of his specials where I don't think they're that funny, and he is a gifted comedian who has some incredible specials and is, he's a GOAT in terms of stand-up. Like, no question about it. But some of his recent stuff, he's just been kind of up there talking, and some of it I've enjoyed, and some I haven't as much. But I thought this was funny. Like, there were jokes. His timing was impeccable. Like, it was just a good 6 minutes of making people laugh, being uncomfortable about some of the topicality, saying things that people think but shouldn't say, or vice versa, and so forth. I just thought it was a well done 6 minutes on an edgy topic, and I think he nailed it. His other stuff, I mean, I find people getting irked about gender and trans people. I feel like that's kind of tiresome to me. Like, man, who cares? That's a community that is discriminated against, that has a really tough go at it from the jump, and
they're oppressed for sure.
Yeah, to go after them, I'm like, pick better targets, dude.
I agree. I think he missed. I also think he's a GOAT. I think he missed. I think overall those Netflix specials were either okay to spectacular. I always have this debate in my head, like, should a comedian always be funny? And it sounds like a shut up and dribble kind of idea. It's just like, well, make me laugh. I'm like, sometimes these comedians, especially Dave Chappelle, is like, screw you. I'm done making you laugh. I don't like the way you laugh at me, you know? And he famously quit for a while for that reason. And overall, if you pull back in a macro way, he's hilarious, but not every special is as funny as the next, you know? I think
And I don't think everything has to be funny, but if it's not funny and you're saying things that I find objectionable or unnecessary or cruel, then I don't know what the appeal necessarily is. Like, is this thought-provoking? Is it funny?
It literally is in his case.
Is it just bullying? Like, what are we doing here?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's too much nuance. When I say he misses, I think he expects us to experience a nuance he's trying to describe. I think he's being too granular. He says he thinks we remember when he talks about his friend, but we forget that as soon as he says certain words, and that's his point. Like, we forget who he is, what he's been through, what the story he told right before his thought was, because we don't consume it in that way. We're just waiting for something because we have a bias for or against him. I think he made a mistake. He just didn't. He bricked, and I think his more serious stand-up specials, some of them were just phenomenal. Like, just awesome. When he didn't bust one joke, he's like, I don't.
The
feel
one
like
during
being
BLM
funny.
was quite good, I thought.
I thought that was amazing, and I don't think of him as a comedian. I think of him as someone who just speaks, right? Like, a lot of people try to do this and fail. Like, Henry Rollins, one of the greatest punk singers ever, tried to do a spoken word career. He's just not good at it. It just didn't quite work. And I don't think everyone has to be good at something else, but it turns out Chappelle is good at many things, and he misses quite a bit. You shoot that many shots, you're gonna have turnovers and miss. Your percentages and efficiency will suffer. But I thought his open for SNL was pretty good. It wasn't as good as I've seen him do, but I was more interested in the response. And the response is kind of like shifting in the same way the Kyrie response is kind of shifting, as we're like speaking to more people, and more people who we haven't heard of are talking. And this is what Elon Musk wanted from Twitter, right? But he's just like fucking it all up. But I think the discussions back and forth between Kyrie and Chappelle are getting more complicated, and I still think we're not ready for any of this.
Yeah, it does seem like the tonality about Kyrie has shifted a little bit. Not so much with Kanye, and justifiably so. But
He's lost his mind.
Yeah. I was like, well, this is a different conversation.
Yeah.
And we've talked about Kyrie in depth last time. We don't really need to get into it too much, but it was kind of ironic when there's this debate about Kyrie and what he's allowed to believe and what he's allowed to say, and what that means. And to your point, are we ready to really unpack that conversation? Yeah. What does it mean to subscribe to these belief systems? And are we going to talk about like Egyptology and these things have been part of other cultural
I'm not an expert in the Bible. Like, I am out of my
years.
element. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so here's Mos Def. Do we want to talk to him about his belief system? Do we want to talk to Raekwon and Ghostface? We're doing a Kith commercial wrapping on top of the Knicks logo. Like, where do we want to go with this conversation? Mm-hmm. And at least I feel like with Kyrie, everyone has sort of smartly said, let's just not do that. Mm-hmm. Let's just have Kyrie talk with Adam Silver, who says this guy's not anti-Semitic.
There's no way this guy's anti-Semitic based off of this sit down I had with him.
He's not. And then he's like, let's revisit this list of criteria that Joseph Tsai has assembled. Let's maybe edit that slightly so we can get one of our stars back on the court and not suspended for anti-Semitism.
Inadvertently, Tsai helped his own cause by making that mistake. His list of demands were laughable and they were kind of cruel in a way we talked about on other pods. I thought that was a very cynical way to treat a sensitive issue. And people saw that. We were not the only ones who saw that. People were like, hey, no, he cannot just like perform for you now. This is not performance. We're having a conversation, but now it just seems like you're doing another thing. And then people started talking, and Joseph Tsai was like, me and my wife sat down with him and we know he's not anti-Semitic. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough for me. I have to accept that, right? Like, I cannot question every single damn thing. I accept that. I like the outcome of that because I want Kyrie to be not anti-Semitic, right? Or I want him to share the beliefs I have, which is like not the ones he was gaslighting us with.
Well, as we've said about Kyrie, his own viewpoints are very opaque. It's just a spongy mix of things that he's inserted into his veins off of YouTube. Like, does he actually subscribe to those beliefs in that video? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Is Kyrie actually anti-Semitic? I don't know.
No,
probably not. I would say no if you yes or no. What is it? I'm like, no. He just saw some video and thought it applied to, as just Chappelle said, like, Kanye was so offensive he got Kyrie in trouble.
That was a good line. But yeah, to your point about judges, right? Like, who's Kyrie hanging out with? Is he a Zoomer lonely boy? Just like with his tortilla press alone, making thousands of tortillas every night, watching these videos. Like, who's talking to him about this? Like, clearly his father, maybe. I don't know, but there is. I briefly Googled this, like, which rappers are a part of, who maybe share ideas with Kyrie. And someone put it kind of in heartbreaking terms for me. It's like, well, in the 80s and 90s, these artists were looking to find their own identity and become like stronger people. And they all kind of came together with this idea. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. We were there for it, but I wasn't a part of it, but I had friends there. I mean, we talked about this, but I was like, right, there's a sense of community. There's a sense of oneness, like one love. When people say that, I'm like, ooh, that's kind of complicated. I love the idea of it. Like, those are words I love, but like, like we can revisit that language a bit because it's Rastafarian, and like there's, Nas is also part of maybe that community, and famously wrote that song that we referenced.
I mean, to me, it's like, it's hard to have conversations about what Kyrie posted and that idea that is contained within that video. And I'm not talking about the anti-Semitic stuff. I'm talking about these ideas that are all kind of similar throughout, whether we're talking about like Nation of God and Earths or the other permutations of kind of Nation of Islam and these different offshoots, which have some things in common. And it's like, these ideas are all a reaction to white supremacy. They're all a reaction to a history that was stolen because of slavery. And it's an idea of reclaiming a past, and whether that past is fictional or invented or real, whatever you are clinging to from this era before slavery, before America, like, maybe it's mythology, but that's also what all sorts of religions are based on. Yeah. And to say like, well, these guys, they're bad because this. I'm like, yeah, but this is part of a larger conversation. This is part of a bigger thing, and we don't really need to get in there and negotiate their exact beliefs. We can kind of put this veil over it, and it's like, there's a reason this exists. Yeah. We don't need to come down on Kyrie unless we're going to go down this route for real, and we're going to talk about where this actually comes from. And if we don't want to do that, let's be a little more laissez-faire about it.
Yeah, man. There's like little slivers of like things that Kanye said like during that crazy couple weeks where he was like, I'm just paraphrasing him. It's like, my story doesn't begin with your telling of slavery. It begins with me being a king, and I wish you would talk about that more. I'm like, fair enough. He is correct there. Like, why do we teach like slavery is the first thing? It's like, well, first, like, there was thousands of years of like kingdoms in Africa. He was like, can we talk about that part? I'm like, that's very fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 and that's kind of the common denominator on all of these like religious sects or orthodoxies.
Yeah.
Is that idea of creating a history in a past that was like regal and noble and not turned like into like it's drawing comparisons to the Hebrews because of the Bible, which makes sense to say that the Hebrews came from slavery, they were the chosen people, and they're like, actually, that's us.
Yeah.
Look at America, that's us. And you're like, all right, let's this is a parable.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be literal.
Yeah, and when I say I'm out of my depth here, I really believe it. Like, I am not a expert in the Bible. I'm not versed in this stuff. I sort of like when these things come up, I personally sometimes too much go into argumentative mode, right? And be like, well, these are the arguments, and he's kind of right there in that. I do not have like a reference point in like other subjects, like whatever the things I'm into, like masa or seafood towers or Peking
I'm like,
duck.
let's just get Max Kellerman and Tragedy Gaddafi
Yeah.
to drop a banger
Yeah.
and let this just all dissipate. Do you remember the group Blood of Abraham?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
So
Barely,
it was
barely.
a rap group. It was a rap group. They may have been on Ruthless Records, actually. They may have been. But
Google.
they had a song called N-Words and Jews with a Z at the end. And I went and revisited it recently because I just thought of it because of this scandal. I'm like, is there a joke somewhere to be had about this whole thing and with Blood of Abraham? And I went back and listened to their song. I was like, all right, it's kind of hilarious. I mean, it is hilarious. And then I kind of was like looking at the notes on it. So from what I could tell, the song has 4 rappers. The first one is Eazy-E, and I remembered that because, Ruthless Records. There's 2 other rappers. 3 other rappers, sorry.
Oh
One of
my
the other
God,
rappers
this
is Will.I.Am is on that record.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And this was when he was part of, I think, like At Band Clan or something like that, which is pre-Black Eyed Peas. But Will.I.Am is on that record.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's also a dude who went on to make that song. Fuck, what's it called? It's like come my baby, come my lady.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
Savage Garden? No, maybe.
No.
Is that what they're called? What's Crazy Town?
Right.
It's that dude. I don't know who the 4th guy is, but it's the guy from Crazy Town, Will.I.Am, and Eazy-E, and some other dude on it called N-Words and Jews. Like, that song exists.
I am on the Wikipedia page for this group, and it is scandalous. Like, my glasses are melting just reading facts. Like, this was the name of the song. I'm like, oh no, dudes, no. Like, this page should have a warning before it. And these were just records that were like sitting on shelves. I'm not into this, man. But yeah, Ruthless and Relativity Records.
No, it was a
much.
major record. It wasn't some little. I mean, they were obscure, but it was not intended to be obscure. It was a real major label putting out that song. And going back and looking at it, Eazy-E,
Cool
Will.I.Am.
Keith was on one of their records. Yeah, and they're the heavily Black Eyed Peas affiliated because one of their
Ruthless
members.
Records.
One of their members, Benjamin Moore, became a video director and directed Nas, Katy Perry, and Black Eyed Peas videos.
Dude, royalty
Hey.
all around.
Hey, this is too much for me, man. Yeah.
But if someone's like, "Hey, have you heard that Posse cut with Eazy-E, Will.I.Am,
Yeah.
and the guy from Crazy Town?" I'm like, really? Was that like a big hit? Here, have a listen. See what you think.
Yeah. It is intense. It is, but this was the era, right? Like this was Gen X, kind of like, not like Reality Bites, Steve Zahn, King Gen X stuff. This was not the tranquil part of Gen X. We had like this stuff around our world a lot, and it helps me kind of think about what's happened this month with these main characters. But
What year did that come out by any chance?
1993. It was the album Future Prophet, and I won't say the name of the song in its entirety because I'm scandalized by it. It's awful.
You know, that era, like early 90s, 93, 94, it was an interesting time because I feel like you had the rise of gangster rap, you know, not only because of NWA prior, but specifically because of Snoop and Dre. Mm-hmm. And they kind of brought West Coast rap to the forefront. And East Coast rap had kind of gotten bogged down. It was doing fast dance music. And, you know, this is when you had, like, Chub Rock, the king. But
you love Chub
early
Rock,
90s.
man.
I know.
Chub Rock is your property tax. I fall back on property tax. You fall back on Chub Rock.
No, I won't. No deal. I won't do it.
Not this time. Damn it.
But I was going to say, you had people trying to really experiment with rap to see how far and weird and dumb it could get.
For sure.
And like,
for sure.
Blood of
Protest.
Abraham is an example of that. But also like Flatliners. That was a year later, I think. That was maybe 93. People were like, what about horrorcore?
Oh,
we could do something with that, right? Like we could,
Prince
we
Paul.
could even crazier.
Yeah. The joke albums Prince Paul put out, you know, like the weird, like psychedelic things. Yeah, wasn't it crazy seeing Mos Def live on SNL in 2022?
Mos Def has aged really gracefully, and you know, you go back to his album Black on Both Sides. That came out like 20 years ago.
Dude, I know.
That's
like,
insane.
I used to hang out with the guy who designed Black Star's first album. I used to work on design stuff with them, and like that came out a long time ago, man. And he sounded great. I was cowering with embarrassment hearing like a backpack rapper doing his damn thing. I love Madlib. I think Madlib is cool. The song sounded cool, but I was like, eeh. He sounded great though.
Black on Both Sides came out 24 years ago, 23 years ago.
Yeah, he's aged well. He was about to become a Hollywood star.
I think that's true. And also, if you listen to that album, you know, I think there was this developmental curve where rap changed really quickly.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the 90s, right?
Yeah.
You know, G-Funk and then Wu-Tang, and like East Coast just left that really fast jazzy stuff with Pete Rock echoing saxophones and stuff in the past. Like it just the genre slowed down so fast and so quickly. And then you had the rise of, you know, the South. But if you listen to that album that came out, Mos Def, that came out, you know, 23 years ago, there are some songs that are, you know, a little like, you know, vintage, but they don't sound bad in that way because we've kind of already came out of that era. Like there's the Primo beats, and yes, it's a Primo beat, but it sounds like a vintage Primo beat there. Mm-hmm. That album does not sound old. His rapping does not sound old. His singing does not sound old. There's a couple whiffs on there every, you know, now and then. But overall, if you look at like rap from that era, it aged like fine wine, if you will, like the finest masa that you could.
Man, I'm not sure, man. I put on like Sound Bombing 2 the other day, and like the Body Rock single, like some of it sounds great. Like some of Mos Def's first singles still sound good, but I remember one of the last few times I played physical records out, I played I think the Reflections Eternal single on vinyl, and the owner of the club comes out and he's just like, "Who's playing this record?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have it here. It's going." and it is me. And he was just like, I've kind of been looking for this. Not hard, he can find it, but it's just like, yeah, I'd really love to have a copy of this. I'm like, hey, when it's done, you can have it. I'll never play it ever again. And he was like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm at peace. I like the record, I'm playing it, but I'm at peace with this part of my life being over. And he was so happy. He was just like, oh man, I'm psyched. I'm glad I came out. And I'm like, I'm glad you did too. Rid me of this object. But it sounded good.
I just feel like I listened to him, and I'm like, this guy. I knew he was a good rapper. I always liked him and appreciated his skill. I listened to him, like, this guy's extremely good. And just like, some of the stuff is a little corny, but maybe it's just because of his voice and being from Brooklyn. There was something about him that, for being like a god of backpack rap, it doesn't sound like Talib Kweli.
No, he sounds a bit. His style did not age as well. Those guys have been through a lot personally too. Like, I remember Mos Def was like, maybe couldn't come back into America for a while. Something to do with like his visa. I forget.
I thought he renounced his citizenship there for a second, but I could get that.
I thought he did too. I was confused to see him up there. I have not Googled it. I don't think about that stuff that much anymore. But like,
he'd been living he might live in Barcelona now. I felt like when I was out there, that was mentioned to me. Like, hey, Mos Def is here. I was like, wow. Nice.
I've seen him on some talk shows. He's got some very edgy beliefs that I can't even paraphrase correctly, but I remember.
Should have gotten into some of those last night.
Yeah. But I was also thinking about like Mos Def, watching him rap like very well to this beautiful Mad Lib beat, and it feeling just like it was out of time. And I was like, what ball player is like that now? Is it like, for some reason I immediately thought of like Baron Davis, like somebody who would just show up in 2022 and just be like, oh, you're incredible, you just don't fit anymore. Like, or Monte Ellis would be the one, right? Like dancing beautifully on the perimeter, just taking like these low efficiency shots, and just like some of them go in. It's kind of incredible, but like you no longer win, like you're no longer part of a winning season of a team.
I mean, it's different because it's not like his own, he didn't have an injury. His disappearance was kind of his own volition. He just sort of stopped making music. Well, what I was going to say, it's different from injury, but he does remind me in that way when you see him now.
Yeah.
Of like a guy who like blew out his knee, like, not Derrick Rose, but that idea, like, this guy was sick, and then he hurt his knee, and he came back, and he's around. Yeah. It's nice, you see him out there. He's doing his thing, has some moments, but it's just not the same.
I mean, I'm guilty of my own accusation. I'm doing dribble bias. Like, he's more like Roy Hibbert. He's not Monte Ellis. Like, I equate, like, these beautiful lyricists with, like, ball handlers in the and one. He's Hibbert. Like, the game just kind of passed him by, and he was like, I'm still the same guy. And we're like, unfortunately, we know.
See, I don't think the game did pass him by. I think he stepped away at the worst possible time for himself. But I could also be wrong. Maybe
you're talking about Roy Hibbert?
Not Tomo stuff.
Okay.
Roy Hibbert's like, I can do this, but I just don't feel like it. Yeah. But there was that kind of opt-out mode, right? The quiet quitting, where it was like he kind of stopped rapping, Andre Benjamin stopped rapping. It was a thing. Lauryn Hill stopped rapping. It was almost that it was undignified to be a rapper. You're
getting to a point. I think the three of them would share a lot of beliefs with some other people we talked about, and when Joseph Tsai has like, these are 7 indignified things you need to do to prove yourself to me, I think they saw it as the record industry, right? Like, they all have beef with the record industry. They're just like, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And as we know now, it's like they probably were, right? They all were huge stars. And Andre talks about it differently. That GQ article was amazing and sad. He was just like, when you write the biggest song in the world, like, it's hard for me to like write another one. He's just like, I just kind of got stuck. And he talks about the artistic side of it, but that's a frustrating world to navigate, man.
I mean, those three are really interesting because they were all immensely talented. They all also had the ability to sing, which gave them kind of an out from being a conventional rapper. And they all seemed to kind of want to take that, you know, and despite the fact that like they had varying degrees of success. Like, you know, Lauryn Hill was like the key component, like one of the biggest selling albums of all time. And then she put out her own album and it was enormous, just like
That was insane.
spectacular seller, hit records everywhere. Outkast, I don't know the sales numbers, but maybe
Insane.
the most successful in terms of artistic and commercial rap group of all time. That may not even be a debate. It might just be them. Like it's them. Okay, done. It's Outkast. And then Mos Def had kind of his kind of culty version of success that sort of mimicked even who he was as a person and an artist within like the ecosystem anyway. Like but they all kind of didn't necessarily give us what we wanted, which is kind of interesting. That we wanted that, you know, Andre rapping solo album. Nope, you can't have it. Lauryn Hill, we wanted to hear her rap more. And then she put out an album with just singing and then kind of vanished. And Mos Def, like he just kind of stopped making music at the peak of his powers, like right when we were ready to leaf peep. He just vanished. It's interesting, that trio of being like incredibly talented, all sort of being in the same circle, all representing something different from like contemporary conventional rap at the time. All of them were like ultimately unsatisfying in some ways to the audience. Just kind of weird.
I would ask like who was satisfying, because I think of like Rihanna, right? I think everyone's been waiting for her reggaeton record for years. We're probably never gonna get it, but she's like, I'm gonna do this reggaeton record, and we're like, holy cow, this is gonna be the best thing ever. And we're probably never gonna see it in the way we want it. But like, who has actually come through for us? Because I'm looking at the highest grossing, or the best selling records ever. Eminem, Marshall Mathers LP, right? 2.2 billion Spotify streams. Worldwide album sales 21 million. But I would say he kind of disappeared on his fans too. I don't think they're satisfied either. I don't know. I kind of can't speak to that.
I'm gonna embrace your line of thinking here, and it's that no one is satisfying.
Yeah.
You look at Jay-Z, you're like, this guy gave us, you know, album every summer, like banger hits, all that stuff. And we're like, all right, go away, dude. You're annoying. Enough, Jay-Z. Yeah. We don't even like some of these albums. Nas,
happened overnight.
Classics. And we're like, all right, Nas, you're still doing Nas's like again. Like, he's still talented, still making albums that sound sonically like Illmatic. Like, boring. Like, who satisfies us?
I have a heater. Kanye has satisfied all of his fans. By the time he petered out, everyone's like, we got what we wanted. We got everything. Yep. Like, we loved Life of Pablo so much. And then we got more, but we just stopped caring. We're satisfied. He did it.
Should we talk some hoops here or what?
I tried to segue us, but, you know, the conversation was too perfect. So we had to stay on Mos Def for a little while longer.
Yeah, we got more to say about Black Star. Who do you want to talk? Who do you want to talk about here? Should we talk? Let's talk T-Wolves. And if we're gonna stick on the idea of dissatisfaction, they are the early candidates for a disappointing team. And I will say that when they made their bold move to surrender future draft picks, young talent, to get Gobert, I said, I think this will work. I think you can put Gobert on that team, and the defense is going to be good. You have enough offensive talent that they're just going to win a lot of games. And thus far, it hasn't happened. They aren't good at offense. They aren't good at defense. What's happening here? What's wrong in Minnesota, Andrew?
Well, I would back up and say I kind of agreed with you too, but it was the high degree of risk, right? Because they were dealing Jared Vanderbilt, who was a very useful player, and Malik Beasley and Patrick Beverley are no scrubs, right? Like, they really help the Timberwolves on the perimeter. Malik Beasley is a kind of a reasonable shooter, and Patrick Beverley is not a scorer, but he does so much, like, spiritually and with deflections and man defense. Like, he is a good player. I thought losing them had its risk, but you add Gobert, and I'm a Gobert fan. Man, this episode's very French, if we think about it.
It's a Christmas
with
episode.
that tartine energy. But tartine's French. Anyway, like, yeah, there's no reason why an elite defender like him shouldn't just kind of work. Like, he is kind of a plug and play guy, but it doesn't seem like Gobert and Cat is the issue. People want it to be the issue because they're the two most famous guys on that team, and maybe the two most disgruntled. But, like, the defense around the rim is fine.
Well, yeah, I think people want to say the issue is Gobert because they want to declare the trade a bust. That this was a terrible move, that they gave up all these picks, and Gobert is overrated because people don't like Gobert. And people don't like Karl Anthony Towns. They're just not popular players for, like, good reasons.
Yeah.
One unleashed a plague
Yep.
across the globe. He started COVID. Thanks, Gobert.
And Cat's just corny, right?
Yeah, Cat's just like he's a dork. But
I mean, Anthony Edwards, remember this summer, said something terrible on TikTok, but, like, people hate Cat more.
and Anthony Edwards though was supposed to be the cool guy, and he was gonna shepherd this unlikable group into being a good team based on his North Star of coolness. Except that hasn't happened. And of course, the people that are going to get blamed are going to be Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert. I would say that those guys have done what we expected. Mm-hmm. Like the organism of a team has not performed, but I would not say it is based on anything that those two guys have done. Cat has been kind of great as usual, and I think that Gobert has been really good too.
Yep. The perimeter play seems to be an issue. Edwards and D'Lo are not having good seasons. Is it an individual effort issue, or not effort? Is it an individual skill issue, or is it the scheme? The first thing people would say would be spacing. Like, these two bigs kind of ruin space. But, like, Cat's kind of a stretch. He, like, shoots his fair share.
Kind of a stretch. I mean,
he's the definition.
He's the one, as far as that goes, yeah.
But, like, that would be the first thing, because Gobert, I don't believe this, but people say Gobert is solvable in the playoffs because he cannot adjust to space. Like, you can manipulate his effectiveness on the court by spacing him out. I don't really believe that. He's a fine enough closeout player. Like, he's not super fast, but he's not super slow. Like, I think there's other issues afoot in Minnesota.
Well, the idea that Gobert can't be used in the playoffs, it kind of falls under the category of, like, styles make fights. Because if you have a Joel Embiid or a Jokic, then
You can
having a Gobert, but having a Gobert is a great thing to have if you're going against one of the league's excellent centers. If the other team is going to go small to mitigate his ability to defend at the rim, well, that's a real thing. Okay, we're going to go with Christian Wood at center, and we're just going to have Doncic cutting apart your defense ISO, and Gobert's going to have to come and try to charge in, and then the ball's going to get kicked out for an open three. Well, then that's true. It just, he's playable until he's not, or he's not playable until he is. Like, it just depends on what you do. Not every team can just go small and say, we're going to get him off the court, because that's not how every team is constructed.
Right, and then you kick that ball out to Jalen Brunson, who was having a great shooting season. Right. the styles made that fight. But it is D'Lo. Man, did you see the other night where he forgot to check into the game? That was
No, I don't. Oh.
so he checks into the scoring table, and the Wolves are playing 4 versus 5, and they're waving at him, being like, "Get in the game! You have been checked in." And he's just standing by the table, like not paying attention to the game at all, just like waiting for another stoppage. And I'm like, that's a reasonable mistake, but D'Lo's always in the middle of these weird situations. I think that was an understandable mistake.
It happens. But I think you said it before, though. The reason here is that Russell and Edwards are just not playing that well.
Edwards is having a weird season. He's an average player this season.
You know, a couple weeks ago, when the Nets started the season and were getting shredded and then Nash got fired, on this very perfect pod, I brought up a couple stats. And I said,
What?
And I said, these net statistics are not going to hold up. They are surrendering like 44% from 3 to their opponents, and they're shooting 32%. This is not going to keep going this way. Not only are they a much better shooting team than this, but this is just not normal numbers. They are having outlier weird results because there's only 6 games in the year. And then they fire Nash, and those numbers start to normalize, and they win a few games. And you know, they're currently 6-8. At that point, they were 1-5, and people said Jacques Vaughn turned this thing around. That could be true. He could be doing a great job, but there was going to be a natural momentum of a swing going back towards them being at least as good, but probably a better 3-point shooting than their opponents, because that's just how the NBA is. There's not going to be a 12-point swing, or by percentage with the Nets and their opposition. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened in Minnesota thus far. Like, whether or not they will have that kind of correction, they don't have a Curry or a Joe Harris or a Kyrie or a KD, like, legitimate, just knockdown, great shooters.
Yeah.
But like Anthony Edwards shooting 34%, Cat 37% from 3. That's low by his standards. Russell 33%. Jaden McDaniels 36%. They only have a couple guys like Slow-Mo and Torrin Prince who are shooting over 40%, and they're fairly low volume in that regard. So I look at this and I say, okay, you're 24th in the league in 3-point shooting, and you're 26th in 3-point shooting defense. Well, those numbers may change. And when that happens, all of a sudden Minnesota's going to win a bunch of games. Now, whether or not it's going to swing in a huge, significant way, I don't know if they have the shooting for that to happen. But they currently are one of those teams that early in the year you look and you say, oh, you're getting fucked here.
Yeah, and we talked about this kind of before the season started. A danger with this team is you just look at that personnel. They're missing like a B, C level basketball genius. Russell, Edwards, and McDaniels, more Russell and Edwards, they're very good NBA players. I'm into them so much, but like, it would help if they had kind of a floor general a little bit. Not to say all floor generals make their teams better, but this team could really use one, I think.
Like a Brun dog.
Exactly, like a Brun dog, even like a TJ McConnell, like something like that, because Jordan McLaughlin and Jalen Noel are not quite that kind of player. And it could be a second unit player, for sure. It doesn't have to be a starter. Like Halliburton, I think, is my favorite basketball genius currently. Obviously, he's a premier player who they cannot get. But, like, they need one. They need something along the lines to kind of stabilize that team and give it a direction. I'm obsessed.
I think Slow-Mo was kind of supposed to be that, right?
But he's not. Yeah, I like him. Yeah, he's kind of a creator at the 4. But, like, he's not in enough. He's been hurt. He's not good enough. It needs something better. He may be the C-level guy I was talking about, but the ball's not in his hands enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty far down the hierarchy of how that team is supposed to work. I just feel like he would be the candidate to me.
More
the guys
Slow-Mos.
they have.
Yeah, add more of him.
But the point that we were saying before is like, okay, they're getting unlucky in terms of opponents just knocking down tons of threes. But do they have personnel to stop opponents from taking a lot of them? I don't know, because you've Gobert and Towns. You guys are pretty slow. They are. Neither one of them is really a perimeter defender. Can Ant defend?
Yeah.
You know, Russell, maybe. Yeah. Like, are you going to be able to stop?
I like
teams
Russell.
from,
He's a secretly good defender last year.
He was smart.
As a free safety kind of. I've been very reductive this past couple weeks. I don't want to talk about the Knicks, but it started with me watching this team do well against the Pistons and then poorly against the Thunder, whatever. But I've been so reductive where I'm like, okay, at this point in the season, we know a little bit, but enough. What is a team? What's the identity of a team? Are you smart? Are you physical? Are you an offensive-oriented team? Are you defensive-oriented team? Pick one and you can make adjustments. Like, it's time to hammer home what you do well to make a run this season. And I look at the Timberwolves team, I'm like, I'm not sure what they are. Like, they've added a great defender in Gobert, but it's not necessarily a defensive team. They have two gifted offensive players in Cat and Edwards, but they're not an offensive team either. I don't know what this team is.
Yeah, I look at that, and I think of Philly's a bit like that too. We don't have to go down a Sixers wormhole, but I'm like, okay, there's a lot of talent here. They should be an explosive offensive team, but they aren't. You know, they're okay, but defensively, like, well, they just started playing Thibault, and all of a sudden the defense got good. Like, it's insane. It's insane. They just sat a two-time All NBA dude for like the first 10 games of the year. Just like, nah, he's out of the rotation. Literally didn't play him. Yeah. And then they say, actually, yeah, I guess we should put this guy on the court. All of a sudden, it's just like staggeringly good defense.
Hey, Thibault was needed to win during Joel Embiid's greatest game ever in his career. No Thibault, no winning that game, even with all of Joel's efforts.
Oh, no chance. No chance.
Yeah.
So here's a fun little Thibault thing. Just using cleaning the glass, which is a good reference for lineup data.
Love it.
So when Thibault has been on the court, the Sixers' defense is giving up 100.9 points per possession. That is in the 97th percentile. Like basically as good as it gets. That is an outrageously good defense. When he's off the court, they're giving up 114 in the 37th percentile. Like, there you have it. It's like, if you want to have a good defense, play guys who are good at it. If you don't want to have a good defense, by all means, leave Matisse sitting there on the bench. Put him on the pine if you want to have a bad defense.
I just imagine Doc Rivers' fiery halftime speeches being like, do you have the dog in you? We're not going to play the guys who are good. You guys have to be as good as Matisse with this stuff. Like, defense is effort. Do you have that? Whoa. Need Matisse. You need that sensitive painting.
So, Joe had his best game of his career. That's just worth noting.
That was crazy.
What outrageous production. And I'm just like, this guy just keeps showing up when Doc's job is on the line. Like, Joe,
they were better off losing
out there.
Yeah.
Joe goes out there and just meat shields with his brilliance to keep Doc there. Very, very weird. His two best games of the season are when Doc needs him the most. There you go.
But it's cyclic,
Doc is
right?
an agency. Well, Doc's an agency with one client.
I mean, when I say it's cyclic, it's like, well, Joe always is good. But occasionally he'll have outbursts. And those outbursts are as frequent as people being like, wait, is Doc Rivers the issue? And they just kind of coincide like twice every day, like a broken clock. But it's just a matter of timing, right? Because in 5 days, when they play a couple good teams, people will be like, wait, we have a championship roster. but not a championship coach. And then Joel will go off and be like, we're fine.
Yeah. I mean, right. The criticism of Doc from the majority of people comes when they lose games. For me, it's just a constant. I think he's bad at this. But
I agree.
typically, it's an ebb and flow. Oh, the Sixers win some games. Doc is fine.
Yeah.
They lose some games. Oh, his job's in peril. I'm like, no. He's just a bad coach always.
No.
Like, it doesn't really matter if they win or lose. But I do think it's pretty obvious that if Joe wanted him gone, he'd be gone. And he is there because Joe wants him there. Like, when you look at the fact that he doesn't really seem to jibe with Morey, fans don't like him. Harden didn't seem to have that great a time with him. Simmons obviously wanted out. Mm-hmm. It's clearly just Joe. Joe wants Doc there because Doc puts the ball in his hands. Doc has made him an MVP candidate 2 years in a row. Doc has helped him become a scoring champion. So if you were Embiid, you say, "Hey man, I don't really see that big problem with this guy. You know, like maybe he could be a little better at the rotations, but from my standpoint, I think he's doing a hell of a job."
Yeah, I always think we go back to a classic Cookies idea. Like, I think we overestimate what a coach does, but maybe we underestimate it. Like, sometimes a switch works. In the NFL, everyone's debating this week about this guy, Jeff Saturday, who took over the Colts and struggling team, and he has no experience, and he won a game, and everyone's like, does coaching matter in the NFL? Are we calling these guys geniuses when they have Tom Brady and just forgetting about them when they don't? And I'm like, there's a validity to that. And, you know, let's say our world is like the Knicks and the Sixers. I don't think the Knicks would necessarily be right in blaming Thibodeau for their mediocrity. I think it's the roster construction. But Thibodeau is a guilty party here. And just flipping him for his equal replacement is going to win games, because sometimes, just like you have that Steve Nash effect, right? Sometimes Jacque Vaughn people vibe off of other people. And yeah, you may get a few games, and they lost last night against the Lakers, the Nets did, and you may have to come back to the water level. But I do think it could benefit the Sixers and many other teams for just switching the light bulbs out. But to your point, Joel Embiid is probably the most influential person in that organization, and he wields quite a bit of power, more so than ever. And he is Doc's guy.
Yeah, it seems that way. I mean, you know, I don't think Joe has ever really criticized Doc, and he criticized Brett Brown publicly a bunch of times, and not for good reasons. And he's, as far as I know, never said anything about Doc. And, you know, when he complained about the team not having enough dogs, that was directed at Morey. That wasn't directed at Doc.
No,
so,
it's not Doc's job.
You know, right. So if you're Joe and you're saying, well, look, Doc puts the ball in my hands constantly, so he's doing the right thing. Like, he's the only guy here who knows what he's doing. He gives me the ball, and
Doc
I do my
turned him
and I do my
into
thing.
an MVP guy because Doc just kept on feeding him, right? If the team wants to be better, Joel is not an MVP guy.
Well, he might be, because he's still great.
Yeah.
But if you said, we're going to really optimize this team, we're going to go get Mike D'Antoni, and we're going to put in a different kind of offense where, you know, we're going to take advantage of Harden more. And Joe's like, well, wait a minute, where does that leave me?
Right.
You want me to just take some threes, get back on defense? You know, where's my role in that? Because as currently, you know, comprised, I know what my role is. It's feed the big man and let me go to work. So, you know, we've talked about this before. I don't begrudge anything Joe has done that has turned him into the solitary pillar of the franchise and wielding all this power. Like, by all means, go do your thing. You have one career. And yours wasn't even promised. You know, you missed 2 years with a broken foot. Like, go fulfill all your ambitions. Be an MVP. Be a champion. Be a, you know, lead the league in scoring. Be the face of the franchise. Be the most beloved athlete in Philly history. Do all that shit. But that may not necessarily coincide with the Sixers best interest at every single point. It definitely intersects sometimes, but also it deviates. But I do not begrudge a player from saying, this is my one chance. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do everything I can for like me in this situation. It's totally
100.
totally valid.
And I think it's all timing. And like a few episodes ago, we talked about like timelines. And I look at some place like Cleveland, for example, like exciting, thrilling team. And they have a player there that I quite love. And he's having an up and down season. He's getting better, Evan Mobley. And Mobley to me is a transcendent prospect. I don't know if he's going to become a transcendent player, but he's at that point in his career where he's still a deadly, lethal player, but he's not looking for his, right? He's still on his rookie deal. He's young, and he's surrounded by veterans who are peaking. And that's kind of what it takes to create like a real window into it. I mean, the Sixers obviously have a window to a championship, but the Cavs did it another way, right? Where they have a bunch of players on different timelines all working together. You start with Kevin Love, who has nothing left to prove, who's having a silently pretty good season. And obviously your main characters, which is Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And then you have your guys who are maybe just as good who don't need theirs, right? Would be the Evan Mobleys. And I think that concoction, and Jared Allen as well, that concoction is like pretty thrilling. And I love to see it, but it only lasts for a brief window. It only lasts until Evan Mobley's like, wait a second, I'm looking at a contract coming up, and like, I know I am kind of the best player on this team. You can get a bunch of Donovan Mitchells, but you can't get a bunch of me. And I think the Sixers had that years ago with Joe, but now Joe's in like GOAT mode, which he should be. You know, like you have a brief time in your life as this kind of athlete to become who you want to be. But like, I don't know, Cleveland to me, I love the Sixers, but Cleveland is like a more interesting way to see a team compete for a chip.
Yeah, and they're everyone's favorite team right now.
That's what I'm trying to get this into a Cleveland pod.
It's like, who are you watching? Cavs. Whether they're from Cleveland or not from Cleveland, people are just into the Cavs. And you know what's been cool about Donovan Mitchell is that when we've had critiques of him in the past, it was based on literally what he did, right? You go back and look at his numbers in Utah, and it was pretty static. We saw who he was as a player, you know, and this is a guy who was not hyper efficient, about league average. This was a guy who had not really become, you know, that much of a facilitator. He'd improved, but he's sort of leveled off, you know, from basically his second season onward in a lot of these areas, you know, and he, you know, you look at his like 2021, 22, they're all really similar. And again, a good player, but mostly a good offensive player who was a poor defender. You look at what he's been doing in Cleveland, I hope it's sustainable for his benefit, for Cleveland, for basketball, because he's just a different player there. You know, his true shooting percentage is 65%. I mean, that is just hyper elite. And before, it was league average. You know, it is just a enormous jump. And you know, you look at his turnovers have remained static, but you know, his passing has gone up. He's just been magnificent so far.
His BPM is 9.
That's what I mean. You know, like this is just
Yeah.
just a different player, the one that was kind of started to calcify in Utah over the last 2-3 years. So I think it's really awesome to see a player make this leap. Now, if it's just based on him shooting astoundingly well from three in a way that may not be sustainable, if it's just something that this happens over a dozen games, and then he'll be, you know, a pretty good shooter going forward, but not this good, we'll see. We'll see.
The space is totally different without Gobert and with Mobley and Garland, right?
I mean, they also have Allen there. You know, they have who's a lob guy, you know, in the Gobert sense. Yeah. But I do think they have more space, especially when you have Love out there and Mobley. You know, you can create these different kind of lineups. But I don't know. We'll see if those 3-point shooting and 2-point shooting stays up, because to go from someone who shot 35% last year, 36% to shoot 43% from three is just enormous as a leap. And same deal. This is a guy who, for his career average, shot under 50% from the floor, from twos, excuse me, and he's now shooting 57%. So these enormous leaps, if he can keep them up, at least to some degree, he is an offensive superstar in a way that, in my opinion, he wasn't before.
I agree, and I'm looking at the details, like field goal percentage by distance from 3 to 10 feet. He's excelling. That's 57%, but he's being assisted on those shots 29%, and that's a Garland effect a little bit, because last season it was only 18%. So it's almost double. Like, he's seeing different looks, and I think a change of scenery is also something we cannot discount. I know a lot of Knicks fans have been blowing up my DMs, just being like, this is the player that we wouldn't trade RJ Barrett for. Meanwhile, a month ago they were like, we want to keep RJ, but I don't think Donovan Mitchell does this in New York. I don't think they have the right ideas. They don't have the right personnel. This is a supremely talented Cleveland roster.
I mean, I'm skeptical that, especially his 3-point shooting, stays at this level. But if he is getting more assisted looks, then it's possible that they can stay buoyant, that they won't just come toppling down to where he was before. Because scoring off of a catch and shoot or an assist is definitely very different from doing it all ISO on the dribble. And as you said, that's what he was doing a lot more of in Utah.
His assisted 3-point is lower. I mean, he had a good point guard in Utah. It was 48% last year, and it's 46% this year. So kind of the same. I expected it to be higher, but remember, Garland was hurt for a while.
So maybe we are going to look at some regression from three, unless
I think that's
he's
possible.
Just better this year.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about 3-point percentages, they actually fluctuate
Totally.
More than people realize.
Same with free throw.
You look at someone like Devin Booker, you're like, wait, why does I thought you were a great shooter. Why are you shooting this way? And so much of it's based on, as you said, which kind of shots are they? How are you being defended? What is the defense trying to take away?
It's bad data, right? Because we don't know what kind of. I mean, we can find out, but when people just say 3-point percentage, it's kind of like a catch-all stat.
Yeah, I mean, Booker is someone like 38%, 32%, 35%, 34%, 38%, 38%. That's a pretty wide spectrum there. A 38% 3-point shooter is excellent. A 33% shooter is pretty bad. So that's just Booker as an example. I think one guy.
Jaren Fox
good
was
example.
30% last year, 38% this year.
Another guy that I think is cool and is having a great year is SGA for OKC. And what he's done is change his shot profile. He is basically unstoppable around the basket, and he's just taking different shots.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome to see someone say, "All right, this is a great player." He was kind of in my mind a guy who benefited from the bubble. He was kind of a generic combo guard, and then he just started basically taking less threes and just getting to the basket a lot.
Yeah. Knicks fans were upset that Oklahoma City kind of dropped a bunch of points on them. That's a talented team. I know they're rebuilding and trying to get Wembanyama or Scoot, but and Chet's hurt. But there's some real tantalizing talent on that team, and SJ is a superstar. So they already have a player better than any player on the Knicks on any given night. But Poku is at least more interesting than any Knicks player that they have, and he can have a nice game 1 out of 4 games. Oklahoma City has a better roster than New York. I don't know if they're a better team. I don't know if they're going to win more games, but of course it's possible that they beat the Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, SGA is playing like a superstar right now. I mean, he's basically turned into mid-range DeRozan.
Yeah,
along with finishing at 75% at the basket. He kind of stopped taking threes. I mean, not entirely, but he basically cut in half from like literally more than in half from last year, and he's just like a mid-range beast. I don't know. He's better than anybody on the Knicks, so like why should you?
Jesus, yeah. I mean, let's not forget about Josh Giddey. That backcourt is awesome. Like, he's changed his game because Josh Giddey, in my opinion, is like an up and coming star, and he's kind of this last week he just really came correct a little bit, man. He's as good as advertised, and
I like Giddey quite a bit. I don't know that those guys can defend together, but
Giddey's tall,
maybe they'll
though,
learn.
right?
Giddey's big. I mean, he's bigger. Like they're both like 6'6", 6'7".
Yo.
But for some reason they just haven't succeeded defensively. But they're also, Giddey's also really young.
Yeah, I mean, there's chatter a lot about maybe SGA at some point getting shut down or even traded. Not because they want to trade a great player. It's just they're on the Chet timeline now. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. I would hopefully see them keep everyone together, but they can't really do that eventually. You have like 3 max contract type players on the same team right now.
Well, there was a rumor that SGA was getting a bit frustrated with the team's
Can relate.
incessant tanking, and I feel like that's kind of different from what we saw in Philly, right? Because Philly did just, or in the Brooklyn as well, where they just sloughed off all the talent, and there were a few guys like Thaddeus Young, was there for a year and a half during the Sixers rebuild, but they were just kind of waiting to try to trade him. They were playing in big minutes. He could shoot as much as he wanted. They had him hoisting up threes. They were basically trying to give him big numbers and use that as an ability to deal him, and they did. And they ended up getting a draft pick in return. But SGA is a young star, and he's just kind of been on this team that has never been trying to win since he's arrived. It kind of sucks.
Kind of sucks, right? And like, he is cool enough, and like his style is good. He's like, I love the league fit pictures of SGA. They're my favorites. He's cool looking. He's a guard. Like, he is a superstar, I think, as a marketing guy as well. And being in Oklahoma City with all these losing teams, with that market itself, is like, his team is probably like, can we get him to Chicago? Can we get him to New York? Anywhere. But he's too good. Like, Oklahoma City knows what they have. Like, I would be very careful in trading him.
Well, that's what I mean. He's good enough that he's kind of helped them be mediocre this year. So if you're OKC, maybe you're just taking a hands-off approach here and saying, we believe in this guy. We think he's awesome. If the guys that we've assembled, these young dudes, are good enough to make us mediocre, so be it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
totally.
They're 6 and 7. If we end up winning 30 games, 35 games, that's cool, because it's going to be based on having guys who are part of our program, so to speak, guys who are young and have value to us, value as trade capital. We've got all these picks coming in. And maybe it's not as important this year to just pull the plug, sit these guys down, trade off someone and say, we're going to try for Wemby now. We're going to try for Chet. Maybe you say, we got our guy. It's SGA. Mm-hmm. We're into this dude. He's 24 years old. We actually have our star, and maybe we'll get someone else. But maybe we start trading for some. Maybe we say we like Giddey, we like Dort, we think Holmgren's going to be good. We got some other pieces. We're ready to actually start winning games.
And I think this is the story of this season for me, is all these tanking teams, we think like tanking is ruining the league. These teams are just jockeying for these 2 stars atop the prospect pile. And I think the story this year is, if you do it right and you let other teams do the losing for you, you can be a Utah, or you could be an Oklahoma City, where you can be like, we have Lauri Markkanen and SJ look like they might be keepers for us. Timelines are weird, but like, they're clearly good players that have value to us as much as anyone else. And then they're just like waiting for the Lakers to lose games, or or just waiting for Chet to get better.
This is how Boston built their team.
Yeah.
Basically, with the Nets deal, because then they could just go about their business, trying to add real talent like Kyrie and Hayward, and getting Horford back, while just having Tatum and Jaylen Brown and draft assets just being handed over to them. Like it's the perfect position to be in. I mean, if you're OKC, you're like, look, we have our two superstars. We have SGA and we have Isaiah Joe. We are ready to go.
Yep.
Isaiah Joe, BPM currently at 6.3.
Charles
True
Best
shooting
and
percentage, 38%, 78%.
I mean, and I brought up the Lakers because like the Pelicans are holding that pick, and that's been the chatter, right? Like if the Pelicans can somehow get their hands on one of these players in the draft, like the league is on notice, and they already have like
league
Dyson
fucked.
Daniels. Yeah, but
league
and Minnesota hands their pick to Utah, I believe. I don't know the exact protections on that, but Minnesota's currently like in the middle of the lottery. So like that's the story, I think. Like let these teams like the Lakers, Chicago, Minnesota take these huge swings, and then there's a chance you can reap the benefits of that. So the structure around tanking has changed palpably. Like to your point, this has been going on for a while with Ainge and Boston, but let other teams do the losing for you. Let the hubris take over there, and like let the probability of the Lakers crashing and burning happen. You don't necessarily have to lose games.
I mean, easier said than done, because that's really the perfect spot to be in. I don't know what that weird noise was. It sounded like someone like jumping on old bed springs. I don't know. Maybe you can hear it. Something's happening outside. I can't tell what it is.
Is somebody eradicating lantern flies en masse?
I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't even want to look out the window. Maybe it's just a huge lantern fly out there. Maybe its leaves are falling.
It's the biggest lantern fly?
But yeah, currently Lakers are fourth, and that pick is unprotected. So if they end up really bungling this series, or excuse me, this season, there is a chance that, I mean, even if they just improve a bit but end up bad, like there's a reasonable chance, currently that pick becomes, I don't know, it could be Wemby or Scoot or something. Like, yeah,
insane.
Not great.
Not great.
You know what is great?
What?
Perfect pod.
Wow.
Yeah, man. We did it again. Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.